Now, having the opportunity to work at the Kennedy Center with our director, Jeff Ringer, and working with many of you, I always feel like I'm the only one in the room who does not speak Korean. Could we see by a show of hands, how many of you here speak Korean? How many of you are Korean? How many of you have been to Korea? How many of you want to go to Korea? That's pretty much everyone. Great. That helps us understand a little bit. Certainly, Consul General, we're among friends, and maybe a pretty knowledgeable crowd as well. Consul General Lee has served as Consul General of the Korean Consulate in San Francisco since early 2010. He's had a distinguished career since joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1981, including Director General for Overseas Korean and Consular Affairs Bureau, second secondment to Presidential Committee on Northeast Asian Cooperative Initiative, Deputy Consul General of the Korean Consulate in Los Angeles, Director of North American Division, North American Affairs Bureau, Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, a secondment to the Presidential Office, First Secretary of the Korean Embassy in the United States, Second Secretary at the Korean Embassy in the Republic of Bulgaria and in Japan. Consul General Lee graduated from Seoul National University and received a master's degree from Georgetown University in 1988. Please join me in warmly welcoming Consul General Lee.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really, indeed, my great pleasure to have this great opportunity. I wonder whether you know much about what consul generals are doing, but since we are representing the government, there are a lot of things we have to do, but out of them, one of the most important things that I have to do is to introduce things about my country to people in the region where I'm supposed to take care of. So also, I have to my best efforts to contribute to making our bilateral relations between Korea, US, and better. So in that regard, this is a really great opportunity for me to perform my job. So thank you very much for this university and especially Kennedy Center for organizing this event for me. And then if I were asked to choose a word which express or describe the characteristics of a Korean people or country of Korea, just one word, then I might choose the word dynamic. Actually, Dynamic Korea is a slogan that the Korean government has been using when we are pushing its cultural diplomacy throughout the world. And as you might imagine, dynamic means it's very fast moving, very fast changing and energetic, and in some sense very strong. And I really believe that the country of Korea and the country of people are dynamic. And then in some sense, they are too dynamic. So they tend to go to the extreme, every sense of life. For example, they have a very bad habit of drinking. When they drink alcohol, they usually, most of the cases, they are drinking so-called, in American expression, Boilermaker. You know, the big glass and small glass hard liquor like whiskey, and big glass is beer, and mixed together, and you have to drink just once, or the bottom. That's the Korean way of drinking. But that actually describing the Korean style of living, going to the extreme. So in that much, the Koreans are very like to be, you can say dynamic. So then you might have a question, what brought Korea to this dynamic characteristics? And when you think about this, we can first look at the past 1 century. Korea has maintained, as you know, a long history, almost 5,000 years. And then late 19th century, Korea began to under influence of many strong countries like China, Japan, and United Kingdom and United States. And then finally, as you know, as some of you know, 1910, Japan annexed Korea. And then Korean people had to endure the 35 years dark age, the colonial rule by Japanese. And then 1945, at the end of the World War II, thanks to the end of the war, Korean people were liberated from the Japanese hands. And it was actually United States who played a central role in making this happen. But only 5 years later, in 1950, Korean people had to war against each other between South and North. So 3 years war. After 3 years war, the Korea was really a war-stricken country and most poorest country in the world. Only ashes remained. And then we started from there. Now, only 60 years after, you see that currently Korea is a very strong country in every terms, economically and politically, and even recent days. We are really talking about culturally superior Korea. You must have heard about Korea K-pop, aren't you? We really are really talking about the Korean culture recently. So in this regard, we might say Korea has experienced very very drastic changes during the past 100 years. Maybe Korean people moved from the hell to heaven. So that might explain the Korean people's very fast-moving, dynamic culture or characteristics of the society. And also when we look further into the long history of Korea, during the almost 5,000 years history, Korean people had to endure the incessant invasions from north, the Chinese side. So they always have to think about hard how to survive from the threat from outside. So that kind of very harsh circumstances may have made Korean people stronger and stronger. So in ordinary life, very hardships and very harsh conditions actually make people stronger and competitive. That's by the same token, Koreans past long difficult time actually has made the Korean people stronger. That's what I believe. But we Koreans have a lot of things to do from now. It's not the end of our efforts. Actually, we have achieved economic progress and political democratization and the cultural supremacy, and we are moving step by step into joining in the advanced group of the world. But still, there remains one most formidable task for us. What would be that? That's the issue of unification, the unification of the Korean Peninsula. Without that unification being achieved, all the things that we have done so far might be in ruin, in vain, because you suppose that North Korea attacks South Korea again, and then all the foreign investment will go away, will be drawn from the South Korea, and then whole society will be really in turmoil. So we need to resolve this issue anyway. So that's actually the most difficult homework, which to be left for the Korean government and Korean people. And then this issue is so difficult to handle because basically in one way, in one sense, this is very much domestic political matter because every single Korean knows this issue very much, and then they would not hesitate to spend overnight to express their opinion about this issue. So it's very political matter. But in the other sense, it's very highly sophisticated, complicated security, international security issue, and which involves a lot of strong countries like United States, Japan, China, and Russia. So it's going to be tough, very difficult. It's going to take time, and also, most importantly, we need the help from strong country, and which is, I believe, the United States, because we cannot count on China or Russia or even Japan to resolve this issue, obviously. So it's going to be, it should be United States, which Korea could count on in the future to resolve this important issue. So that's why the relations between Korea and the United States is single most important issue in Korean government foreign policy. And then now let's think about the current status of the bilateral relations between Korea and the United States. Now it's very good, especially under the current administration, from Korea, Lee Myung-bak administration, and then from United States, Obama administration. Now the collaboration, the cooperation between the two governments, especially regarding North Korean issue, is very wonderful, situation now. But when we let me draw your attention to the fact that the Korea and then United States actually are very different two countries in every aspect. For example, language and way of life, culture, value system, and political system, and geography, and everything. There's nothing in common between the two countries. So we have more than 200 countries now in the world. If you line up all those 200 more countries, then Korea is situated here, then United States in the other end. But these two totally different two countries are now having very closest, very highest level of bilateral relations, so-called military alliance. So it's very unique situation. So what you say about this unique situation? The two totally different countries having most closest relations in the world. This is possible because of certain specific political or security situation. In this case, Korean War and maybe Cold War. As you know, U.S. soldiers, more than 50,000 U.S. soldiers died during the Korean War. And U.S. forces were stationed on the Korean Peninsula from that time on, 60 years now. So that kind of special security situation made this kind of special relationship possible. But if this kind of special situation might change or disappear, then what would happen? The current very close relationship between two countries will remain as it is now. Maybe, well, we need to really think about, we need to doubt about that. So in this regard, we really need to upgrade, upgrade these relations in the future in order to overcome this handicap. So in order for us to do this, I think we have two things. Number one, we try to make our bilateral relations more reciprocal, because so far, Korea in a position to receive the helps from the U.S., but not the other way around. But we need to, Korea needs to make a more contribution to help the United States. Thereby, we can make more sound, more healthy bilateral relations. But that's why the recently Korean government had decided, for example, to send troops to Afghanistan, run the risk of, the losing the life of the Korean citizen, because we thought it's important to the U.S. government. And also, Korean government recently decided to increase their contribution to United Nations peacekeeping forces throughout the world, which we also think is important to the United States government. And also, we need to, more importantly, we really need to make the alliance between the two countries more comprehensive. We need to broaden, enlarge the scope of our relations, so that if something happens about the security situation, as I mentioned, then our close bilateral relations will not be changing, will not be shaken. So, in order for us to do that, we really need to enlarge our scope of relations, like in the field of economy and culture and human exchange. So grassroots relations. That's why it's important for us to make American people know more and correctly about Korea. And also, that's why I think it's so important, the cultural pursue an active cultural diplomacy in this United States. And I think it's, in this regard, the role of the Korean American people in the United States and the role of the American people who know a lot about Korea is so important. You're going to help us, Korean diplomats, in performing our job to make it happen, such kind of comprehensive alliance in the future. So I hope you to help me in doing this, and which is really vital to our national interest. I think it's better stop here. It's better to two-way discussion, not just my boring, lengthy lecture continue. So I think I'm glad to receive your question of any kind, not just confined to foreign policy. Maybe you can ask about the Korean drama on Korea pop singer and everything.
So we have a wireless mic. If you would please raise your hand, and then when we bring the mic to you, just tell us your name and what you're studying. So before you ask your question, right up here, Sarah. We need to record. So.
Yeah, so just hold on for 2 seconds.
The home audience can't hear you.
Oh, hello, my name is Jeong Gwan Lee, studying industrial design here. I'm from Korea, and I have a question. I served my military in DMZ like 3 years ago, and ever since I, been really interested in the relationship between the South and the North. And recently I've been kind of, worried that, the conflicts, there have been some conflicts between South and the North, and I'm just wondering, like, I wish the World War I happen again, but what if it happened? The people who served the military here, do we have to go back, and how can we contribute to defend our country? That's my question.
Well, yeah, we have to say the two military provocation by North Korea last year is a serious one. But we think Korean government think that two kinds of military provocation actually alerted us, actually provide us opportunity to think about again our military preparedness against North Korea. So that was actually a good opportunity for South Korean Army and Navy to strengthen their position, strengthen their capability. So since that on, the Korean military are doing a lot of things to increase their capability. So I don't believe North Korea will dare to do the same kind of thing again in the future. They know that we are very on the alert, and that we are doing a lot of things to defend our country against their threat. So you don't need to worry about to go to Korea, go back to your country to serve in the military. Maybe you better focus on studying here.
Jeff Ringer, I'm the director of the center here. Let's stay on defense for a minute. You mentioned in your remarks the presence of U.S. military troops in Korea. Over the years, periodically, that's caused some tension between Korean society and U.S. soldiers stationed there. How would you describe the current status of U.S. troops in Korea?
Yeah, that's important issue. Yeah. That actually, the previous administration, the current Lee Myung-bak administration, previous Korean administration is a Roh Moo-hyun administration, and Roh Moo-hyun administration is very liberal government, so they are very generous about, for example, North Korea, and then at that time the whole society is very liberal. So people, especially young people, are very raising their voices up at that time. And then the year of, I remember 2000 or 2001, maybe 2002, there are some tragic accident happened. U.S. military forces car just hit the two middle school girls, Korean girls, and then they died. So because of that specific, unfortunate incident, at that time there was some high sentiment of anti-Americanism among young people. But actually, because of that accident. Number two, at that time it was Korean people began to feel pride about their progress. So, you can understand in that kind of situation, they really like to say something, to raise their voice. And then that target happened to be the United States. So that's one-time incident. It's not a kind of thing to continue forever. So now, 2011, current Korean society, that kind of anti-American sentiments does not exist any longer. Yes, there are some young people, not just young, there are some Korean people who have very antagonistic attitude against United States. But I can say with confidence it's minimal, just fraction. The most of the Korean population, most of Korean public, they really think America is the most important country for them, and that they know that they have to appreciate for the U.S. help. When in the time of Korean War and after war, the military progress, economic progress was only possible with the great help from the United States. So we all know that. So don't worry about that anymore.
My name is Tim Browning. I study Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic. I'm fairly unfamiliar with Korean culture, except for maybe the music of rain.
Rain.
You spoke of cultural divides between America and Korea. I was wondering if you would be willing to elaborate on that, and if you're familiar with our local Mormon culture, do you feel like that is closer to or further away from Korean culture than average U.S. culture?
First of all, I'm sorry, I don't know much about the Mormon culture well. I'm Protestant, I'm Christian, but I'm not so familiar with your culture, so I may not in a position to elaborate on that. But in terms of difference between Korean culture and U.S. culture, there are really a lot of things. As I mentioned, first of all, look at the language. It's totally different. As I said during the luncheon, maybe for the American people, Korean language is the most difficult language in the world. Maybe second to Arabic, maybe same. I checked with there's a military institute in Monterey area. There are a lot of U.S. soldiers studying foreign language. Then, according to them, the Korean language is the most difficult language. I confirm that. And by the same, the Korean people, the English is the most difficult language. Don't you agree with that? I spent a long time. So since my junior high school, so it's been now 40 years studying English, but still my English, as you see. And then other things are, Korean society basically, Oriental, the most typical Oriental culture under the Confucius, influence. But U.S. culture is basically Christian culture, right? I'm not sure. But, I think it's like kimchi. Kimchi, as you know, the most representative Korean dish. Kimchi is very spicy. Kimchi is might not be anything you have tasted before for the average American. But once you taste it, and once you understand the taste of the kimchi, then you will soon be addicted. That's the same. Even though the two cultures are so different, so it might take time for American people to get to understand the Korean culture. But once he reached some kind of threshold, then he will soon become the great fan of Korean culture. So that actually symbolizes the relationship between the people of the two countries, I think.
My name's Andy. I'm studying Korean and economics. South Korean policy towards North Korea and humanitarian aid in North Korea seems to be kind of always in a state of flux or progression, perhaps. I'm wondering, what sort of role does the U.S. play in South Korea's formation of policy towards North Korea? Or does South Korea foreign policy independent of U.S. influence?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very important issue. South Korea policy toward North Korea cannot be independent from the U.S. policy toward North Korea. Just because it is United States, the North Korea I think is important. North Korea really like to make a deal with United States in terms of security guarantee, in terms of economic assistance. Without good relations with the U.S., North Korea understand that they cannot obtain the security guarantee and they cannot get economic assistance from outside. So that's why they try to they try to deal with only United States, skipping South Korea. That's happening now, even now. So U.S. government needs to avoid to follow this North Korean tactic. So U.S. government needs to very closely hand in hand South Korean government in dealing with North Korea. They should have same position in important items of their policy toward North Korea. That's what U.S. government needs to do. That's what Korean government, South Korean governments ask U.S. government to do.
All right, I have a question. Before I ask you a question, I just want to say that you should better know Mormon culture, because Mitt Romney and John Sussman, which is really prominent Democrat candidate for next presidential campaigns, are Mormons, so you better know them. All right, so my question is about FTA, free trade agreement between United States and Republic of Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance to meet with the governor of Utah, Gary Herbert, last time, and he really didn't know about the free trade agreement issues.
Really?
So
Oh.
I hope you please contact them or just explain that. So how do you think about the free trade agreement between United States and Republic of Korea? How that could be beneficial both parties?
Yeah. You guys making all the important questions. Thank you very much. Actually, FTA is really important issue currently to both government. As some of you already know, it's now in the final stage It was signed 3 years ago between the two governments, but unfortunately, U.S. Congress is not in a position to approve that. So we have waited 3 and more years to see the ratification by U.S. Congress. And then last December, Korea and U.S. sides had another consultation to satisfy particularly U.S. automobile industry, because they insist that the FTA signed by the two governments is not good for U.S. automobile industry, because they are arguing that Korean cars are being sold well in the United States, but there are only only a small number of U.S. cars in Korea. So at last December, actually Korean side made a great concession to U.S. side in that regard. So after that, as far as the contents of the agreement is concerned, no problem. And even from U.S. automobile industry, they in favor of this agreement. But now the issue is within U.S. Congress. There's some political issues intervened in this issue, so that actually make things delayed. But anyway, I personally been cautiously optimistic. I believe that maybe before the end of next month, we will be able to see this agreement will be ratified in U.S. Congress and also in the Korean National Assembly. Then, if that happens, then from November, then this important agreement will be effective. Then whole tariff on products of both countries will be removed. For example, in California, I usually take the example of Napa Valley wine, because on Napa Valley wine, currently 15% tariff is imposed. And then with the effectuation that agreement, that 50% will be gone immediately. That means U.S. Napa Valley wines will get cheaper, 15% in Korean market. Think about that. It obviously will increase the volume of export from U.S. side. So economically, it's really wonderful agreement. The volume of export and also the job opportunities of both countries together will be tremendously increased, number one. Number two, not just economic terms, but also, as I mentioned, we need to make a very comprehensive alliance between the two countries. Actually, FTA, we can say that is kind of economic alliance, not just security military alliance. So by making that agreement, we can enlarge, we can deepen our bilateral, relations. So in that term of security, in that term of whole bilateral relations, is critically important.
My name is Kendon Kurzer. I'm currently working on a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages. I wonder if you wouldn't elaborate on the South Korean perspectives of the relationship between North Korea and China, and perhaps a touch of why Hanja is important. I teach a Hanja class.
Hanja. Relations between China and North Korea. Many people think that China is on North Korea side and U.S. is South Korean side. So U.S. South Korea versus China North Korea. It's not wrong, but it's not 100% correct answer, because I like to emphasize that to the Chinese government, North Korea is a headache, actually. But the China is in a position to really like to maintain status quo, because they really like to focus on the military economic progress, the fast, rapid economic development. They really focus their energy on the economic field. So in order for them to do so, they need very stable, not changeable environment. That's why they like to status quo. But that does not mean that they like whatever North Korea is doing. But actually, North Korea is making, putting the Chinese government in a very difficult situation recently. They tested, nuclear weapons. Then they, sank South Korean Navy ship. That kind of things actually, is condemnable in international society. But still, Chinese, they cannot but help North Korea in one way or another. But doing that is very difficult for the Chinese government. So if in the future, the real issue comes, the real moment of unification comes, and then if Chinese government needs to make a real eventual final choice, I don't believe Chinese just get in hands of North Korea. Okay.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm studying international relations. You spoke about the need for the United States to help South Korea in a unification effort with North Korea. What do you propose that the United States should do beyond what it's already doing to help that happen?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the most important thing is U.S. governments maintain its position, which supports South Korean government. Whatever South Korean government is doing, U.S. needs to understand South government's position, because sometime in the past there was a time when the attitude, tactics of both governments regarding their policy toward North Korea is not identical. U.S. government is rather very hawkish attitude against North Korea, whereas the South Korean government is just mild approach to North Korea. But that actually not help in resolving this issue. That actually helping North Korea, that actually making North Korea more provocative. That happened actually in the past. So that's the most important thing. And then now we have so many issues. We need to issue of the make a permanent peace regime on the Korean Peninsula, which is very complicated issue. It's going to take a long time to explain that. But when we resolve this issue, we may have to do a lot of things. But most importantly, we need to maintain very close, close collaboration, cooperation, cooperative relations, the same stance between the two governments. That's it. That's what we want.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Margaret Lee. I'm studying international relations. I'd like to ask, with unification, how do you think that would affect the South Korean economy?
Yeah, that depending on the how and when unification will be materialized. Well, the South Korean government position is gradual approach to unification. First, we producing some kind of community between South and North Korea, economic community and other communities, and then on the basis of that community, we gradually change North Korea inside of North Korea. We gradually induce North Korean changes into desirable direction. So after that, we make a kind of a confederation between the two Koreas, and then we gradually lead to unification. It's a kind of gradual approach. So if unification could happen in that fashion, that's gonna really help the whole South and North Korea economy, because you imagine the unified Korea with that gradual approach. The unified Korea has a territory is larger than just South Korea, obviously 2 times larger, and also population will be almost 70 million. So South Korea, unified Korea, is in a position to become really strong nation, like U.S., China, and Japan, and Russia, maybe. But what we are concerned is the possibility seeing the unification happening not in that fashion. Maybe all of a sudden, North Korea just collapse inside, And then South Korean government cannot but, accepting that situation, cannot but accepting that collapse North Korea, even though the South Korean government does not want to do it. So that's another scenario. In that case, we might pay the price for that sudden collapse of North Korea. But in that case as well, eventually, the unified country obviously will help the Korean people and the Korean country, not just in terms of unification itself, but also in terms of welfare, in terms of economy, in terms of everything.